Well, good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Pretty good here, and welcome to the channel. Hey, this morning we're going to do a little true or false two-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive Tacomas. Recently, I put out a video about the advantages and disadvantages of both. But here are some true or false questions. Let's see if you guys can get these right. First of all, four-wheel drive Tacomas are faster off the line than two-wheel drive Tacomas. The answer is true. Now, you might not think so because you think it has more to turn, right? And they're a little bit heavier. But it's because they get better torque and power when split amongst all four wheels. So it's all going to take off at once as opposed to the two rear wheels, or one, pushing the truck. Next up, handling and braking are better in a four-wheel drive. That would be false. Both would be the same, or even the four-wheel drive would be worse than the two-wheel drive. Potentially worse due to the added weight of the four-wheel drive. Now, that particularly applies to braking. Obviously, when you're going to stop and you've got more weight, because the four-wheel drive has more parts, right? More components. It's going to take longer to brake because it weighs a little bit more. Plus, when it comes to handling, you're pulling around all that weight. It's not going to be as light and as nimble as the two-wheel drive. Next up, four-wheel drives are superior at towing, off-roading, and less likely to get stuck. Now, this is a pretty simple one, I would think. I mean, you know, only on a slippery road rather, four-wheel drive is less likely to get stuck and provides more traction and torque to all wheels. That's kind of the definition or the explanation of it. But it makes sense, right? I mean, if you're off-road, obviously, and you encounter a situation where maybe your back two tires are going to get stuck, you still have the front two to pull you out, right? You've got more contact on the ground with wheels or tires that are actually being driven. I mean, it makes sense. And also, when you're towing stuff, again, you're putting down more power to all four wheels or tires to haul that load around. Kind of makes sense when you think about it. Number 4. I believe there are 10 of these. Number 4, four-wheel drive negates the need for snow tires in the winter. What? That would be false. When temperatures fall below 44 degrees, all seasons become less effective regardless of four-wheel drive. You know, an all-season tire is kind of a split. They try to achieve a happy medium, right? They want them to be a little bit softer, so in the summer, they grip better, but they want them to be a little more grippy in the winter, so you get a little bit more tread, a little more aggressive tread. But in the winter, and like it says here, when temperatures fall below 44 degrees, that rubber compound starts to stiffen up. It gets a little bit more brittle, if you will. So it's not going to grab the pavement like a winter tire would that has a more aggressive tread. Just kind of makes sense once again. Next up, turn the page here. Four-wheel Tacomas, this is four-wheel drive Tacomas, have better ground clearance. Again, this is true. Kind of a no-brainer. Obviously, a four-wheel drive truck is going to be set up for more of an off-roading application. So the truck itself is going to be raised up in the air a little bit. That's going to allow for better passage over obstacles, or if you're in a winter climate, over snow piling up on the front of the truck or through deep drifts or things like that. So obviously, if you're driving a four-wheel drive that's up in the air higher, because that's how they're set up to begin with, you're going to have better ground clearance. Kind of a no-brainer on that one. Next up, four-wheel drive Tacomas are less fuel efficient. That's true. Four-wheel drive Tacomas weigh more and take more fuel to haul around that extra girth. I mean, it makes sense, right? They weigh a lot more. It's gonna take more gasoline to power them. Kind of a no-brainer in that one too. Obviously, if you add more weight to a vehicle, if you're pulling stuff all the time, it's going to cost or take more gas anyway, and it's going to cost more. to drive a four-wheel drive vehicle. And that brings us to a similar question next. Four-wheel drive Tacomas cost the same to own as their two-wheel drive brethren. That would be false. Four-wheel drives have higher fuel costs, which we just talked about. Again, you're hauling around more weight, so it's going to cost you more to drive that thing around. They have higher maintenance costs. That's because they have more parts, more seals, more inner workings, more stuff, and they cost more money. I mean, if you've priced out the two-wheel drive versus the four-wheel drive, then you know, obviously, it costs more money to buy a four-wheel drive truck because they have more components. Let's see. Next up, number 8. We're nearing the end. Number 8 says, four-wheel drive Tacomas have higher resale value. You know, that's true. First of all, overall, that's true. But a little caveat to that, it kind of depends on where you live. I mean, if you live in a winter climate, then obviously four-wheel drives are going to be more in demand. Whether people actually need them or not, that's something I might argue depending on what kind of weather you get in that colder climate. But either way, it's a perception that's seen, I think, by many people that live in a colder climate area, that four-wheel drive is better in case, you know, that once in 100 years they ever get enough snow or ice to make a difference. Obviously, if you live in, you know, the further north you go, like Canada, for example, where they do get more snow and ice, obviously a four-wheel drive would be more of a necessity and worth more money than a two-wheel drive. However, if you live where I do, where we don't get snow or ice, it's basically tropical here most of the time, doesn't really matter as much. It's more of just a preference thing. Next up, number 9. Two-wheel drive Tacomas shouldn't be driven in winter. Well, that's false. That's kind of like saying that when winter pulls around, if you've got a two-wheel drive truck, you should just put the cover over it, stick it in your garage, and not touch it all winter. I did it for years. I'm from Ohio, lived in Ohio. I also lived in Michigan for a while, but drove around in Ohio in the winter. I used to drive all kinds of two-wheel drive, some one-wheel drive vehicles. And never had any problems in the winter. I think the key to driving a two-wheel drive truck in the winter is put some good winter tires on it, number 1, and put a decent amount of weight in the back, especially over the rear tires. Obviously, what's going to contact the ground. That will help you out immensely. Again, I did it for years. I never had any big issue with it. You did slip around a lot more than you would with a four-wheel drive, obviously. But you have to be mindful of that when you're driving and drive in the conditions that you're in. And that kind of leads us to the final true or false question. This one is, four-wheel drives make you invincible in the winter and off-road. And invincible is probably too strong of a word. They make you more confident. They make you better able to navigate through the obstacles, whether that be snow or mud or rivers or hills or rocks or whatever. That would be false. A four-wheel drive in any vehicle really is only as good as the person driving it. And I'll give you an example. Again, living in Ohio for years, I drove in snowy conditions. It never failed that at rush hour, the weather would come in, it'd be snowing like mad, and you're on the freeway with 50 billion other people, you know, and it would never fail. The freeway's covered, 3 lanes, you can't see any of the lanes. So we start making our own, right? So you're putzing along probably about 20 miles an hour if you're lucky. And here goes a giant four-wheel drive truck just barreling past you. And you think, you know, what are you doing? I realize that you have better traction because of that four-wheel drive. But as soon as you tap the brakes or turn the steering wheel, you and I, we're equal. You're going in the ditch the same as I would go in the ditch. And you're sliding into that car in front of you. And boy, did I see that happen a lot. As easily as a two-wheel drive would. So you need to make sure that you drive at the skill level that you're at. irregardless of the conditions that you're in, a four-wheel drive isn't going to make you an avid off-roader or race car driver simply because it has that little four-wheel drive symbol on that switch or button in front of you. So pay attention to the conditions, I guess, depending upon your skill level. Anyway, that's it. Those are our 10 true or false four-wheel drive questions. Did you get them right? Did you guys know all that stuff? Leave a comment down below. Some of them I know were pretty intuitive and pretty obvious. As usual, appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the web. Have a great day. Bye.